Seated, please. Can we have everyone seated, please, so we can begin?
I do that, yeah, exactly.
Okay, everyone. Welcome back to the next session on nurturing the positive powers of India. This is regarding the CII India at 75 YI conclave. I hope you had a good lunch, and we're ready to get started. The theme of India at 75 is near and dear to my heart as well. And I was in New York when the late C.K. Prahlad actually envisioned it. This is not a vision of one person, but one that persons across the globe can align with. And more importantly, achievable when Indians all over the world come together to make it happen. We've seen Indians come together many times over the past 6 decades. We do know that whenever we do, we can make a difference. So why is it that we only come together to protest? Mother Teresa never attended an anti-war rally, but she always said she would go to a pro-peace rally. She understood the power of positive thinking. It's important not to dwell on the anti, but because being for something can result in something much more powerful. This is actually directly from a book called The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. If you haven't read it, I highly encourage you to do read it. It talks a lot about the positive powers. And that's what we're here to talk about today. And this session is about nurturing the positive powers of India and engaging Indians to make a positive difference through the power of participation. It is now my privilege and honor to introduce you to Mr. Arun Maira, Member Planning Commission, Government of India. In this minister-level position, Mr. Maira facilitates the shaping of policies and programs relating to industrialization and urbanization in the country and tourism. He brings a wealth of leadership and consulting experience to teams internationally. He's a sought-after speaker on the subjects of leadership, organization development, and the future of India. Prior to his appointment on the Planning Commission, he has served on boards of several large Indian companies, including the Tata, Birla, Godrej, Hero, and Mahindra groups. He was the chairman of the Boston Consulting Group in India, Save the Children India, and the Axis Bank Foundations. He's an India at 75 Apex Council member and a trustee of the India at 75 Foundation. World Food Program India Trust, WWF India, and Aspen India. I cannot think of anyone more qualified to speak about this topic. And in sticking to this topic, Mr. Maira has requested this session be interactive. And by default, it requires your participation. And to ensure that, we will have Mr. Pradeep Bhargava make sure that that does happen. So without further delay, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Arun Maira and Mr. Pradeep Bhargava.
Thank you very much, Raja. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Just put that on. Thank you. I'm really happy that you're stepping down, both of you, because you're now part of the crowd, right? Part of us. I'm going to ask you questions to begin with. And really, I intend to. I am so happy to be in Pune. This is about young India. And I'm realizing that young India is growing up. I'm meeting here young persons who grew up here in Pune. They were boys of 8, 9, 10, and 12, along with my children who were similar ages at the time, playing soccer together and going to college together. So it's been lovely to be here with young India. India is really growing up very well here in Pune. I have acquired a profession. It's a skill which is turned into a profession which you don't know about, but I'm telling you. Apparently, the old people in Pune, my friends, not my kids' friends, know about it. So last night when we visited one such old couple, they asked me, "Do you still dance?" I said, "You bet I still dance." Yes. And I have a reputation in Delhi, and wherever I stay for a while, to be the, like you have disc jockeys, I'm the official dance party starter. You get the music on, and I guarantee you, if you have the music on, that we will, yes, put on the music, that within 10 minutes we shall dance together. And that's what India must be about, the people of India dancing together. Davos 2005, the CII arranged a large party in Davos. That was the India year in Davos. Our slogan was India everywhere, India everywhere. And at the ball, which they have at the end of the Davos week, in which the host country has the privilege of hosting everyone to the ball, India was hosting the ball. And we had on stage Shamuk Davar and his Go-Go Gang girls, and all of us council members of CII in our Bandgalas and our Safas, the pride of India, standing below. And there were the hundreds of our foreign guests in their long gowns, the ladies and the men in tuxedos and so on. So as Shamuk Davar and girls began to dance, I mean, you can't resist the beat, can you? So we were, some of us at least, tapping in the front there, and I could see that there were women and men beginning to tap their feet on the other side. And Yogi Deveshwar, who was then president of CII, said to me in his Acha Punjabi way, he said, Arun yaar, we've got to get the world to dance with India. Come on. Said, I am the official dance party starter. So I walked across the floor and saw this woman who older woman I knew, happened to be the wife of the chairman of BCG globally. And I said, you know, Anne, you look as if you want to dance. She said, you bet, but John, her husband, just watch him. He doesn't want to dance. So I said, why don't you just step 2 feet ahead of him? So she did, and son. Meanwhile, another woman tapped her husband and said, come on, we can step up a little bit. And soon, everyone was coming onto the floor. And then Shamuk Davar realized that this was the way to do it. So he told his girls, go get the people on the floor. So they all jumped off the stage, and this I'll do shortly, and they got people to come on the floor. And by that time, you don't need to be asking anyone. The people are dancing together, stimulating each other. And
girls at the behind as a surprise for us.
Pradeep, you can see what his mind is all about, right? Yeah? Okay. So, the girls were also down and dancing, and the whole people were dancing in their gowns and everything. And one of these go-go girls I realized was sort of dancing with me, actually. So I said, yeah, good, let's dance. And then she said, sir, you should have been one of us. Yes. And as my wife says, that should have been your profession. Well, here I am. This is after lunch. And it's good that, as they say, after lunch, you stir yourself a little bit. So I'm going to ask you a question. And I would like you to answer the question in a positive way. Meaning, if your answer is yes, it requires a big raise of hands, not just, yeah, I agree with you, a big raise of hands. We'll get some stimulation. The first question is, how many of you think that India is a country in which every young person, rich, poor, caste, whatever, religion, whatever, place of birth, whatever, has a fair and equal chance to make their own future? So you believe India is such a place? Yes. How many of you believe that there is much more yet to be done to provide people an even fairer chance and a better start to make a better future? Yes. So though we are satisfied somewhat, we are not happy with, we have more to achieve. Okay? More to achieve. And how many of you would like to do something about it? Now I'm watching. You don't want to do anything about it. I said big hands up, Ritu. Yes. You did? Okay, right. So we must together shape this country so that every individual, young and hopefully even the older who still haven't had the fair opportunity, can still join the dance. This question, I asked the question about, do you think every child, and that was to child because they were children. There were about 60 children from the elite schools of Delhi and 60 street children brought up by the Salam Balak Trust. And this group had worked together for about 3 days, and I was called in to share with them some thoughts about the policy and the future of India. So I started with the same question, that do you think every child in this country has a fair chance to get ahead? And remember, that group was 60 street children and 60 elite children, and they spent 3 days together. When I asked that question, and it's not too long ago, 2 or 3 years ago, not a single hand came up. Now, has India changed so much in 3 years? Or is it that we are not aware of the disadvantages some people have, which those young kids of 13, 14, 15 from elite schools had begun to recognize as they were with their compatriots with much less in life? And so I asked the next question. Would you like every young child of India to have a fair and equal chance to stand and make his or her own future? And then, of course, not just one but 2 hands were coming up from each side, except one girl sitting in the middle. She was from one of the elite schools. And I said to her, like I said to you, look, I want you to put your hand up if you believe it, and I know you do. She said, no, I don't say yes to that question. So all the others sort of hands started going down. What's wrong here? So she said, you said every child in India to have a fair chance. I want every child in the whole world to have a fair and equal chance. And by gum, then there were 2 hands up and kids dancing and say, yeah, that's what we want. It's about including others in our thoughts and realizing that others may not feel as we feel that they have a chance, that they may not feel that they have that chance. This is the India that we have, and this is also, we are saying, in our aspirations, the India that we wish to have. So I'm going to share a story of India, and I get reminded this TV ad. It's some car, and since there's someone here for Volkswagen, I must say it's not a Volkswagen car, it's a Hyundai car, right? Where Shah Rukh Khan saying great styling and great mileage. He says, what is styling mileage? What's the story? What's the story of the car? And let's talk about the story of India. And this story of India that I'm sharing with you has been created by people like ourselves and, like I mentioned, people who are not as privileged as us. And I'll tell you who they were, when they have written the chapters of this story, and let's see how this story is evolving and the further chapters that we must write together. There are 3 chapters here of the story that I'm laying before you. The first was written in 2000, the India scenarios, which CII provided a platform, just a platform, for people of various walks of life to come together to answer the question for themselves, what sort of country do we want to create? And what they came down to was, through many, many meetings, structured in a process, that the key was that we've got to change the model that we are using to produce change in the country. We've got to change our idea of who the leaders are, or what we mean by leadership in the country. And as we change that, we can create in a shorter time the India of our desires, what we now may call India at 75. And don't worry about the fireflies and buffaloes yet, we'll come to those. Then in 2005, I'm talking at the time when we were at Davos, many people there said, while India was saying India everywhere and China was already well on the road, business people, smart guys said, look, these people are extrapolating economists and saying that India's economy will be the world's 3rd largest and China the 2nd largest within 30 more years. And they said, we don't believe economists. Because economists had said in the 1980s that really the contest was between the United States and the Soviet Union, and that Japan would more likely emerge as the country leading the world's economy in this coming century. This was supposed to be the century of Japan. And it was Soviet Union, China, Soviet Union, USA, and Japan, and there was no mention of China. And yet within 10 years of that time, by the mid-1990s, it was becoming pretty evident that there was a big sun rising, not Japan, but China, and that Japan maybe is sinking actually, relatively. And of course the Soviet Union was no longer. So the point of these business people was that, if you just use just numbers and extrapolations, you can miss the forces that can cause change to happen. So we would like the World Economic Forum to provide us some scenarios of what may happen in China if you consider social political forces, as well as what may happen in India. And similarly, the other BRICS countries that were being announced, Russia, Brazil, and so on. So the World Economic Forum came down here to India to understand India, as it were, the forces shaping India. They took advantage of those scenarios that CI had already prepared, which I'll be sharing with you, and with those foundations, built the scenarios of India going into the next 15 years, and put economic numbers onto them, which I'll share with you. And then, in the last 3 years, in the Planning Commission, which I joined 3 years ago, we said, rather than the planners making plans for the people, let's get the people engaged in making plans together. And so I'll share the third set of scenarios to you, which is a much wider set, but you see the same thread of the story. You can recognize the heroes and heroines of the story as I'll unfold it for you. I'm going to keep it for a pause, and I'm going to ask you a question. What do you care about most of all? And I want you to be quiet, perhaps even shut your eyes if you have to for a minute. Just ask yourself, what do I care about most of all in life? And if you think ahead, India at 75, 10, 12 years old from today, if at that time the world has become a world in which what you care about so much is manifest in the world, where you live and around where you live, where you work and around where you work, what pictures come to your mind? The world has become a world which is infused by what you care about most of all. Who do you see around you at work? What sort of people? What are they doing? What's the spirit of their work together as you step out into the city? Who do you see? What's happening there? What's the look on people's faces as they're working, as they're walking back at home? What's the spirit of India, people of India? Okay, now just talk to each other. What came to your mind? Sit on a table, or you sitting together, 3 or 4 of you. Just share some thoughts for 5 minutes. Listen to each other. Don't one person give a lecture to everybody else. Give 3 or 4 persons together. Give each other a chance of a minute each, and just share what comes to you.
Thank you.
Some mics at the back, no? Just keep the mics ready at the back. पीछे के दो. You're very quiet. Yeah, good. Yeah, ठीक है. You know each other. Good. Okay. Functioning, okay. I'm going to ask, pass the mic around at the back. I saw a lot of young people at the back. One of you, please take a mic. Here, piche jaiye, at the back. And just say some words that were being exchanged by you, the pictures that you were talking about, the caring that was being expressed. Anyone? Someone stand up there and take a mic. Well, Pradeep is dying to say something. No.
You talk for young people.
Who would like to just share thoughts of what was being said? Would you like to? Yeah, sure. There. Yes, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Bhavish Dani. Just sitting here, we did little bit sharing about the thoughts. So the first thought came in the mind, what is going on and what positivity has to be put. Where the positive energy has to be put and make the life success and make it more happily what we are living and start to live in present instead of doing lot of thinkings.
Very good, thank you.
Okay.
Be positive. Start to make a change here and now. Someone here? Pass the mic around. You had a hand up on this side, right? Yep.
Hi, I'm Yogesh Goyal. A couple of things which we discussed were security of our families, a concern about climate change, and an overall environment of prosperity should be there for everyone. Yeah.
Very good, thank you. This side is. Yeah, okay. You there? Well, carry on.
Good afternoon, I'm Nitin here. We had a mix of two ends at the table, you know. Some envision happiness and satisfaction, peace in terms of everyone around. Whereas some people express that difficulties we have, or somebody expressed even loneliness, feeling of loneliness and difficulties and challenges ahead. So it was a mix kind of both the things.
Very interesting, yeah. That the loneliness of being alone. Yeah. Okay.
Arun, the few things which came up in the panel here was collaborative growth and inclusive growth rather than elitist power centers. Security, concern for security in the future, and responsibility and accountability of people who are at those positions of responsibility and accountability. They are being more transparent and accountable for what they are doing and what they are bringing forth.
Collaborative and accountability for those who are responsible for something.
And the nation as such, holding those people accountable also.
Very good.
Thank you.
Anyone in the front? Let's move up. Yeah.
Our table was very positive.
Okay, come, say something.
We all saw a very vibrant, happy and peaceful place.
Right now.
All of us, every single one.
That's what you imagine to have, want to have. Yeah, you want to have that.
We want to have that.
Yeah. Harmonious. Use a Chinese word now,
Harmonious,
right?
peaceful, vibrant, energized and happy.
Very good. Harmonious, peaceful, energized and happy. Let's take that. Let me just come where I can see you all from here more easily now. Okay, so I said there were going to be 3 chapters to the story. The first chapter to the story was, let me go back, is about the models of change and leadership. And this came out of very insightful work which was done by, as I said, people, school children, college children, school teachers, bureaucrats, economists, business leaders, such a variety. Sharing insights from their lives, then inviting others and going to the villages in India themselves on learning journeys, coming back, bringing, and soon the group grew into more than 100 who were coming out with their insights into what process of change, what model of development, what nature of leaders would produce this vision, which I think we are all broadly sharing. And they said, well, and this was children doing work also, so they put it into nice pictures. I hope you can see. There's a picture of buffaloes wallowing in a pond and a child on the side. And they said one model of change, which seems to be pretty pervasive in India and elsewhere too, is that you have big people, big leaders, and you give them big positions, and you put them together, and you expect expect that they together will produce the change that you wish to have for the people of the country. Yeah. Arun Maira and the Planning Commission and ministers and so on, and somehow they're going to produce the change. It's not happening, right? But it's the same model we quite often use in other large organizations. You say experts, the experts in various things, put them together, and somehow the goodness will come throughout the organization. And they said in India, this model is there. It's not delivering the results to the people, and the people are epitomized by the little kid on the side who is waiting for education, waiting for water, waiting for health, waiting for sanitation, and time is passing, but the system of organizing and leading change, the one which is of buffaloes wallowing together and hoping to produce the change, is not producing the change. So India continues to be a country with poor education, with poor malnutrition, poor health, and so on. And those children are growing up poorly educated, poor health. So when you say they have an equal chance, I mean, some of us have been blessed with a better education, better health. There are many kids, our age maybe, I mean your age, or younger than you age, who haven't had this. So how could they be having the same fair chance for opportunities? But this is past. How are we going to ensure that no more kids are going to be left out of this pond of growth that some of us are able to be in? So this picture of buffaloes wallowing in a pond, as this young girl actually, she drew these pictures and she said, this is what you see when you go around in the hot summer of India. The buffaloes, want to cool off, so they get in the pond. And when one buffalo thinks he's had enough or she's had enough and wants to get out of the pond, the other buffalo says, no, not just now, I want to stay on longer. Equivalent, this person said, was, one person says, I have an idea. This is what should be done. The other person says, but that's not my idea, right? So struggle, and this person settles down. Then the other person, buffalo, wakes up and says, I got an idea. And the first says, you never listened to me when I had the idea. So they're all wallowing in the pond, right? You understand. Now we call these people netas, leaders. They acquire leadership by position. There's another model of change that at 2000, this is the year 2000, the people of India said they could see happening. And this was a model of peacocks strutting and around them birds scrambling. In India, until the early 1990s, we were not used to wealth being celebrated. We didn't have on the magazine covers pictures of the wealthiest, most glamorous people. This is a good change perhaps, that people were getting wealthy, but we were celebrating the wealth also, a change. Peacocks strutting. But same time in India, there were little birds scrambling all over, hoping to be part of that story to somehow get a similar wealth. Now this, as economists would say, is an inevitable process. If you open up a situation and throw grains of opportunity with the intention that they are for the birds, as it were, the small birds, poverty shall be removed when you open opportunity. But first the bigger birds, because they have the wherewithal to take opportunity, and the pigeons arrive first, and the sparrows have to stay aside, and then the peacock arrives with all already there, meaning either wealth or the power of education or the power of position can take those opportunities earlier. So we'll feed first, and the others are waiting, has the peacock fed enough? Will there be enough grain left behind? So this process of cumulative causation, the economic theory of growth, was playing in India, and these were consequences of it that people were perceiving. Now peacocks are leaders also, and we say, our corporate leaders, wealth leaders, and so on and so forth. So this is another model of change and another model of who leaders are. And here, leadership is by the wealth that you have. At the same time, in 2000, one could see another model of how people were taking the law into their own hands to get a more, what they believe were a more fair process of change, which was the tigers prowling in many parts of India. I mean, Naxalite and left-wing extremist tigers with the power of the gun seizing what they believe they should have now. And wolves prowling. But again, there's the little animals there, they just get squashed in the process. But we call people who have muscle, that's also leadership. It's power through muscle and might. So 3 models of leaders: position, wealth, the power of the gun, physical might. Fortunately, this may seem that, I think the peacocks is not bad, and under certain situations, maybe having someone use a danda is also not bad, but there's something wrong about both of those. But we could see in our own country, I'm talking of 2000, through the stories of the people brought to us, their own stories quite often, that there was another process that was bringing change about in the country with another idea of who the real leaders are. And that was this picture of fireflies arising. We noticed then that there were many people who were neither wealthy, nor using force, nor had they high positions, who were producing change in the communities in which they lived with the power of passion and compassion. Okay, so there's another power of leadership. The source for power of leadership is in your passion, what you care about, and your compassion for others as you step out to make the change happen. We saw in India in 2000 all 4 models applying. As you can see today, you can see all 4 at the same time. The question is, which one of them are we going to put our energy behind to make our way, the India way, to produce change which is both inclusive as well as faster? So, we come to the year 2005, and the World Economic Forum is here with their economists and their people, and mixing with us and asking Indians again what's going on and so on. And they found that the combination of this change by the birds scrambling while the peacocks are strutting, and simultaneously the violence that was increasing, not just in rural India, but beginning to appear even in our cities. It's getting even worse now. They describe it, these are foreign gentlemen, called India scenario number 1 is India is a Bollywood. It's like a great movie in which there is glamour and there is violence. It's great fun because you have them both. It's great as a movie, but if you're living inside it, it could be a bit dangerous. And fortunately, as I said, a movie comes to an end, but if you're in the story, where is the story going? And if you're in the story, how are you going to shape the story? So scenario number 1 was Bollywood, which the World Economic Forum folks said is a scenario with tension in it, and that tension could result in the system being unable to come to agreements and alignments. And so political misalignments caused by the tensions in the society can make policy making progress stumble. You back to buffaloes wallowing. And so they called that scenario Atakta Bharat. This is 2005. They also did see, and it was very difficult for economists to see the third one, but they have so much evidence that they found of the third one that there was a third scenario of what was happening in India. And they said, if this scenario you could put your energy behind to make your scenario of India, which they called Pehle India, then India would be the number 1 in the world. It may not be number 1 in terms of the largest GDP, but it would be number 1 in the world in terms of developing a model of how to grow a really inclusive society, in which it's through entrepreneurship, it's through the energy of many people having the opportunity to make something of themselves and the world around them that we will shape. Remember, these are pictures as a young girl drew, and she said, and very rightly, and we all love it, that when on a dark summer night in the north, and it happens here too, fireflies start to arise from the bushes, and many arise, darkness can turn to light. And these fireflies, the light is in them. You don't give them the energy, it's energy in them with which they light up the world around them. So these are economists. Now, they want numbers to go back and tell the people in the World Economic Forum at the next meeting in Davos, which we then presented. I had the pleasure of the next year after India everywhere saying, what may India be based on these scenarios? And these are numbers calculated by the economists in the Oxford Economic Forecasting in the UK and our own NCAER in India. That the consequences in terms of GDP of India following either the Bollywood way of development, which could result in the Atakta Bharat situation, or ourselves lifting into the Pehle India, the fireflies arising method of development. They said this is 90.
Why was it called Bollywood? That's not fiction, that was real. Still,
Pardon?
it was a reality.
It was,
Bollywood,
sorry.
Bollywood scenario.
Yeah.
Bollywood scenario gives an impression as though it's fiction, but it was a reality.
That's what they meant. I mean, this is the reality of India, and they described it to us, and these were foreigners, and some of us, including Mr. Devesh, were very, very upset with the term. That Bollywood is a good thing. They said, of course it's a good thing. But we are just describing to you, using the metaphor that it's a movie which you enjoy and are not a part of. That's okay. But if it's your story, are you okay being in it with those other consequences that you can see around it, okay? I think it catches immediately, yeah, okay. We have to shape our story, and do we want it to be based just on glamour and violence or compassion and something else in that story? So the forecasts showed that if India remained, and this was the past trends up to 2005, the actual growth rates, Mr. Kamath showed you some numbers too, that going forward, this is from 2005, the Bollywood story will have steam in it, will get to, like it's shown there, to 8 or 9% growth as we did get into it, but that the tensions in the society will start to become very manifest, and that the Bollywood story is going to be starting to decline, as you can see, down towards 6% growth, which has actually happened. If, however, you were to put your weight behind another model of leadership and working together to make change happen, you can sustain your 9%, even take it up to the 10% growth. Okay? If you get into the Atakta Bharat story and remain there, it's like it's 5% and so. Now, the point is that in India we have come down to 5 or 6%, and we have come down to that because we haven't deliberately grown the fireflies and the story of change based on distributed leadership, local leadership, collaboration to make change happen. Okay? Poverty. Well, very clearly, if you get into the Atakta Bharat situation, your poverty reduction would be the least. It's the purple bar there. If you remained in Bollywood like we are, poverty is reducing. It is reducing. But if you have the fireflies arising, they are, through their effort, earning more, and we are supporting them in earning more. They are getting less poor, and the country's GDP is growing at the same time. It's not giving them something. You're enabling them to grow. And that reduces poverty the fastest. Okay? So here we got the backdrop of 2005 and these scenarios. But as I said, it's 2012 that we would get 5 or 6% growth was clear. Now what do we do? So we are in the Planning Commission and we looked at the country. And well, before I put that up, we used a very extensive process this time. For the first time in our planning history, we said, let's ask the people of the country what really matters. And we put some questions, 9 or 10, just to start the discussion. It may not be the most important question, but to start the discussion. And these discussions were organized by some 950, almost 1,000 civil society organizations across the country in their regions. Some represent women, some represent Dalits, some represent tribals, and so on. And we deliberately consulted with the youth. And amongst the organizations that helped us to reach out to the youth was Young India and India at 75. Very good job done. And there were other youth organizations also. Organized the youth to answer around those questions. And we had the business associations, CII, ASSOCHAM, FICCI, and the small industries associations also. And from all this, millions of organized inputs coming through these channels to us, we could begin to understand what is really going on in the system. So it's like you ask many people who, each of them is actually not blind, but because they say something to you which you don't see, you say you're blind. So someone says, look, I see this big thing of the elephant and it's a big fat thing. And he may say it's a tree trunk. The other says, no, 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 what you're wrong. There's a very thin thing, and he's seeing the tail. But it's all right. And you put it all together and say, now can I see the relationships between these things and what is the whole system, the elephant, about. And this is the picture of the system of India that emerged. That at the center of India today is a lack of trust in institutions amongst citizens. It's manifest. This lack of trust has been spilling out into the streets in the anti-corruption movements. It's spilling out into the streets right now in terms of the safety of women. It's there. And it's not just about government institutions. I mean, government is least trusted, so business, I think, is sheltered behind. But when Edelman, the trust barometer, they measure the trust of people in institutions as they did last year, and they point out that actually, I'll first give you the average of the 26 countries in the world in which they do so, that the faith of people, the trust of people in businesses and business leaders is so low that only 26% of the people surveyed believe that businesses really care about the social consequences of business. And only 19% believe that business leaders have any ethics. It's as low as that. Of course, they said government is 4-5% lower on each of these. But I mean, how does it satisfy Aam Aadmi, right? I mean, I don't trust these and I don't trust them. If it was a horse race for an election and you had to choose one or the other, then maybe business would win. But this is not going to be by election. This is, you're going to have to win your trust if you wish to be a leader yourself. You've got to make your own contact with what people care about and how you can work in partnership with them to create the world that both of you, business and they, would wish to have. So we have to change our business models, we have to change our governance models to build up the trust in institutions. And because there's no trust in institutions, there's increasing impatience and protest, and that increasing impatience and protest is led to this political logjam. This, by the way, is what the World Economic Scenarios had already predicted. So here we are in a political logjam, and because we're in a political logjam, we keep crying, when are the economic reforms going to be made? Where's the will of the government to make the economic reforms? But who trusts? What reforms? Will they benefit me? They might be benefiting the guys in Davos who told you to make the reform, but what about me? So this is the position in which we are. If we want to sell reforms and have them adopted, we've got to win, business as well as government, the trust of the people. That we understand you, we care about you, we are accountable to you, as someone said. And please, therefore, allow us to lead and to make the changes to happen. And because we are not able to make the reforms in good time, the pace of inclusion in the growth of the economy is not as fast as it should be, and the state of the nation's finances is not healthy, both with respect to the current account deficit and much more with the budget deficit also. And if we don't fix the state of the nation's finances and improve the rate of growth, especially inclusive growth, our GDP will not grow. So we can keep talking about targets of growth, but unless you are fixing the root causes for slack growth, you will not get it. So there's no point debating, is it going to be 8 or 9? I say the answer is, are you going to do something about what causes it to go up and what is preventing it from going up? And if not, so. We looked at external forces also, and as part of this process at the Planning Commission, we had our national security experts, our external affairs experts, and the people who work on climate change and so on, the larger global forces with us. And as we modeled what they had also come up with, they confirmed in the model that actually the external forces do have some effect, but they are not the salient effect at this moment of time. What is within the control of India, our institutions are the key to growth. And if we can get our institutions going and more progress and trust in the country, then we are stronger vis-a-vis external forces. If we don't grow and become stronger, we are more vulnerable with respect to external forces. Now, economists would put only the things outside that box which are below there: growth, GDP, nation's finances, some measures of poverty and inclusion into the economic model. The things between, above it, that is the trust in institutions, for example, or environmental resources, are considered as exogenous to the economic model, but they are part of the system. So unless we can model everything together, we can't really improve the system. Okay? So this was good. Now what do we do? 3 scenarios again. We said we are at this moment in a scenario in which we are muddling along. And we are muddling along because we remain as that so-called Bollywood scenario. And that can slip into the falling apart. And I think in the last year, many of us have been very concerned that maybe we have fallen apart. And of course, we remind ourselves, no, we can't fall apart. And maybe we are not. But we are on the brink, as it were, it seemed to us, falling apart. If we could get ourselves to align together around this other model with many ships, independent entrepreneurs, but all working towards the same vision, following broadly the same course, the flotilla advances, fireflies are rising in the back as you can see, then we could have the outcomes that we wish to have. And again, these same numbers, I mean the same scenarios, I'll give you now what the Planning Commission's projections were in terms of economic numbers. Firstly, we said here in this model that by the way, the green box is that key I was showing you. What's the key to produce the desired scenario? There is a set of internal factors that are affecting India's growth. Those are the primary factors. Yeah? And we will shape our course, and in whatever is the external world, we'll be in a certain position in that world. So worrying too much about the external factors and not working on the internal factors is not going to produce the result that we wish to have. So we start from the internal factors, the green box, and say, if I take the flotilla advances method of development and change, then we had said that we could project, we are at a low level now, about 6%, an average of 8.2% during the 5 years of the 12th plan. If we remained in the muddling along scenario, the up and the down and the up and the down, we could end up with an average of 6.5% in the plan. The difference of 2% is what economists would say is due to exogenous factors. It's actually due to us and what we do or don't do. And similarly, if you get even worse and it falls apart and there is a bit of pandemonium, it's possible in parts of the country, then we could get even lower rates of overall GDP growth. The key, as it says there, reforms to improve the governance and implementation. The two speakers that spoke to us this morning, the members of parliament, both said that. Did you not hear the first, Mr. Javadekar, just talking about governance and implementation and which states are good at it, and Supriya confirming the same. That is what we must demand as citizens. Reforms to improve governance and implementation. And indeed, the movements for women's protection as well as corruption movements, anti-corruption movements are demanding those reforms. None of those movements are saying what's happening to FDI and retail. They want these real reforms. And I think people's instinct is right. We've got to fix this. Then all the other things are likely to happen. So how do we fix this? How do we collectively make change happen? How shall we get more fireflies to arise? How shall we enable their light to be brighter? How shall we do this? So we thought through that. So we need to have an India backbone implementation, a network. It can't be a single institution that's going to make implementation. It will have to be many people making change happen where they are because they want change there. And a network of such people, such institutions, that's the network. And they will, by what they do, which we've talked about a bit and I'll say some more, be able to implement actual change, not just talk about it, by getting collaboration amongst the various actors and stakeholders and implement change. We're calling this the backbone of India because with this ability alone can India achieve its objectives. This ability must be in many places to achieve the objectives. It's the India Backbone Implementation Network idea. Now this India Backbone Implementation Network idea recognizes that India has the potential, as we keep saying. We heard Mr. Kamath also. But there are many constraints to grow. This is manufacturing. But I could apply to infrastructure, to health, to education. That there are constraints, as we know, in land issues, environmental issue, messy business regulations, inefficient public services, delayed projects. At the bottom of them, the root causes for these constraints are there's confusion amongst people, not enough coordination, there's too much contention among stakeholders, insufficient collaboration. Intentions are declared, but there's not implementation. To get the implementation, we've got to get more collaboration and more coordination. How do we do this? And this has to be done, by the way, not just at the center. It has to be done in the states, and we heard examples. And more than that, I know, it has to be done at local levels, at city levels, village levels, and so on. Fireflies are there. We have to be the fireflies of change with other fireflies around ourselves, make our points of light into larger pools of light, maybe Pune one and other places. And of course, there must be coordination at the state level and similarly at the central level too. So at all levels, the skills to collaborate, the skills to coordinate, the skills to implement are necessary. Example, It's a movement of learning that we wish to have, like the TQM movement in Japan was. In the TQM movement of Japan, tools, processes became available to people, whether they were on the shop floors of manufacturing companies or offices, in public services, running trains and so on, whereby a country which in the late 60s, early 70s was thought of as a country which produced shoddy goods, things didn't happen on time. I mean, I'm old enough to remember that. That used to be so. And as you know, Pradeep, in then 10 years or 15 years, the whole world said, what happened? Japanese quality in almost everything. The trains were the Shinkansen, the electronic products, car products, chemical products. So a whole nation transformed its ability to get things done. And it was by people in small groups taking charge of their situation, their system. What is it that we are accountable for? What could we do together to change the performance of this piece of the larger system? And measuring their progress, a learning process.
There was some coordination.
There was coordination not by, I tell you, the government of India tries to coordinate a lot. We sit in Delhi and ask for reports, and then I'll tell you what is to be done next. That is one model of coordination. Someone on the top who's giving instructions to people, asking feedback to the top, and then you wait for revised instructions. That's one model of coordination. But in a large system where things must be done differently, firstly, secondly, there are many things to be done, and thirdly, the distance between the coordinator and the things to be coordinated is very large, it doesn't work. You have to have lateral coordination amongst the people to begin with. And then these groups must learn to, without imposing on each other, coordinate with each other and not be coordinated. Coordinate with others, don't be coordinated. That's the key. So this insight we are converting into a movement of learning in the country, of learning to get things done by working with others. There are three policy changes that we must make in the country, or approaches to policy that we must make in the country. The first is the approach we take to inclusion, and the two speakers this morning mentioned it very well, that not inclusion by handouts, but inclusion by empowerment, faster growth of livelihoods. People are not included at the moment, we know, and we know we have to look after them. So whether it's philanthropy or it's government subsidies, it's about those who have been left behind and charitably doing something for them. But that is not sustainable. And neither do people like it. No one wants to be on the receiving side of charity. They'd like to be able to stand on their own and maybe progressively even give charity. So the faster growth of livelihood. So all efforts to skill, all efforts to create enterprises, all efforts to improve the environment for the growth of manufacturing and other enterprises has to be the strategy, rather than more attention being given in the debates about food subsidy here and something there, which is not sustainable. The second is the approach we take to governance, and Pradeep already has set me up to answer that. Strong centralized governance does not work. Our experience is saying so. So we demand that we want someone there to make another coordinating body at the cabinet to get it done. Considering the size, diversity of our system, that is the wrong approach to coordinate. The better approach is localized governance. Strengthen it. The third policy change, governance change, is the approach we take to sustainability. Large centrally planned projects, your sector, Pradeep, and you love this, setting up big power plants will take a lot of land and a lot of water. On the notion, it's an economist notion, of course, it works, that you get smaller unit costs. But look at the setup cost required to achieve the small unit costs. And also, that thing better keep running all the time, otherwise you don't get the small unit costs. Whereas small distributed generation, the risks are spread, they are all locally adapted, they can use a variety of fuels locally available. This is in the case of power. Similarly in the case of water, local solutions rather than big grand dam solutions. And same I would say for enterprises. One large central big auto plant, and we have auto plants here, saying that no, with one Model T, and you can have it so long as the color is black, you want the color black, and so. But then needs change, times change, and that becomes a dodo. So the model of organizing to produce must be much more based on community-based and local solutions, distributed solutions, rather than large centrally planned projects. All three, as you can see, require a change in mindset. And we have to imbue this change in mindset into policy making and execution to produce the results. Localized governance, faster growth of livelihoods, community-based solutions. They sound like fireflies arising, don't they? Yes? I have a vision for India. It's a vision of inclusive and democratic capitalism. It's capitalism, but it's democratic. And it's not peacock strutting capitalism, it's inclusive capitalism. Democracy is supposed to be government of the people, for the people, by the people. We have in this country the ability to conduct elections on scales which no one has done ever in history before. And we use technology also, which the US is struggling to use in its elections, and it's the second largest democracy by numbers. So we know how to have governments elected of the people, governments of the people elected. What people are crying for is that the government doesn't seem to be for the people, it's not accountable to the people. So our processes of RTI and all what the CAG has been doing are to show whether or not the government is acting accountably for the people. But that too is not enough. People don't just want things done for them. Democracy means I want to be able to shape the policy or understand what it is. I want to be able to shape the execution. I have a part of it. I must be an important part of the decision making and the execution. So democracy by the people. We have said in the country in 1993 that we will have the 73rd Amendment so we can get panchayats, and 74th Amendment so we can have local urban bodies. That's already 20 years ago. What have we done about it? We had the insight. We've also made it into a law. But what have we done about it? So we don't have the deep democracy that the definition of democracy says. So when we proudly say that we are a great democracy, we are a large democracy. But are we a great democracy? Second, on capitalism, businesses for the people, by the people, of the people, similarly. C.K. Prahalad wrote a seminal book about the profit at the bottom of the pyramid. And in that first rollout of that idea, the examples, as you will recollect, like the sachet of shampoo, was pointing out to corporations that the poor people can be a market for you if you innovate your products and you sell them accordingly, then you will get some profit out of it. The profit is made by the corporation. It's out of little incomes that poor people have. But why do they have little income? And why is it they can't buy a whole bottle of shampoo rather than a sachet? Because they don't have incomes. So if people are included in the production and distribution of more stuff and get more incomes, you're growing the market thereby. So again, the notion of corporations and their innovation is to change the innovation in your business model in which you will include the resources of people, Indian people, educate them, skill them, make them part of your production and distribution process. So they'll give you that competitive advantage while also growing the market. And this is happening in the country, and people have begun to recognize the need for corporations to include people in the process. Now this is people getting incomes by being part of the corporate process of production, distribution and so on. But we want entrepreneurs. Corporations don't like employees. You know, it's a hassle, they get a union and so on. Can you have a model in which people own their own businesses and they produce as entrepreneurs their own businesses, and many such medium and small businesses together form a larger enterprise, the might of which is huge. So these models, these are enterprise models now, in which the ownership is distributed, accountability for parts is distributed, but together it works. Global supply chains are of course one such concept. I'm talking of now within the country, even the small and the big working. And there are examples again. Famous example of RA, the Amul, is an example like that. I mean, women owning their own buffaloes and being part of a large enterprise, as also are the more recent models of Fab India with the producer companies and so on. So we got many coming up, and Seva. So that's where we got to go. If we have businesses which are owned by the people also, they are the capitalists, by the way. And that's a democratic model of a business. So we get the situation where in India we have 1 billion Democrats and we can have millions of capitalists also. That's my vision of India, very vibrant, entrepreneurial, democratic capitalism. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to leave you with this thought and vision. I'm going to now allow Pradeep, my friend, to pull my leg a bit and get questions in, right?
No.
But you promise you're going to dance with me, you're going to put the music on.
Well, if you get some more of those people. No, thank you so much, Arun. It's been a pleasure. I just want to relate something personal in the sense, here's the member of Planning Commission, I'm just giving you that title right now, telling us how much participation, collaboration he was seeking with the society and wide cross-section, so not one Bhavan, Udyog Bhavan and Nirman Bhavan. They've gone to people's homes and asked for inputs. Sir, 30 years back when I used to work for BHEL, a state enterprise, I still remember when we used to go to Yojana Bhavan, we were told, you're a public sector undertaking, you're not Sarkar. So even a public sector enterprise was considered alien to the planning process, to the decision-making process, to the policy-making process. And here's the transformation that we see in you, sir, where you are talking about, hey, I'm seeking opinion. What a change. That itself is one of the most interesting, positive thing that one comes out of your conversation. And I really, really want to compliment you on. He's been doing this. I mean, even when he was BCG and we were getting into his style and his persona has been one of seeking, but he provokes us. Certainly he did provoke us with lots of things, which is, once again, getting the best. So here I would say, having said that this is the engagement, power of participation, power of